Welcome back. Let's talk about histograms. First, what I want to let you know is that we have some images inside of the lessons that were designed to help you learn about histograms. Now you could come in here and you can click on each image and you can see where it says density and hue and saturation, and then finally come to histogram, but this is a really ineffective way of looking at images. So what I recommend to you to do is instead go up here to where it says text and then type in the word histogram, and you will see only the images that have histogram in the title will show up. So excellent. Now we want to look at histograms. What is a histogram? A histogram is essentially a bar chart. And that bar chart lets you know about how much information is in your shadows, how much is in your normal exposure, and how much is in your highlights. Both your library module and your develop module have histograms. The one difference between the two is that the develop module will let you create an effect on the image using your histograms. Okay, so let's start with a really basic image here. If we take a look at this image, we're going to see that most of the information is on the left-hand side of the histogram. That's telling me that this image is dark. Now I have to consider the image. Is it meant to be dark? Or is it underexposed? Those are the two things. When I see a histogram that's on the left-hand side, I immediately think, is it meant to be dark or is it underexposed? Well, one of the things I might want to know is, are there any points in this image where it goes to black without detail? That means when it prints, it just won't have any information in the blacks. So I'm going to turn on this clipping warning here. It's that triangle. That is going to let me know if there's any areas that have black without detail. And sure enough, there are areas black without detail. Let's just make this image a little bit bigger. There are areas that are black without detail. Now, is it important that I keep those areas black with detail? Maybe, maybe not. That's just a personal call. I'm also going to put on the clipping warning for whites, and I don't see that there are any clipping warning for whites. Okay, no problem there. Now, let's just go to another image to get an idea of histograms. I'm going to go to this image right here of the lion, and I'm going to see that the lion actually has more information on the right-hand side, which means that it's area that has highlight detail into it. And I don't really see anything in the blacks. Now, I do have my clipping warnings on for the highlight information, so I'm going to take a look and see what happens if I take my exposure and I brighten the image up. And if I keep brightening it, we're going to see that eventually I get to a point where it's just paper white. There is no information here. And if I did a print, that would actually be paper white. There would be no ink laid down in that area. And that doesn't necessarily make a really great image. I'm going to double click on the word exposure, and that's going to set that back to 0. Now, I have to consider what I want this image to look like as a final product. Do I want to have some blacks in here? Should this be darker? I think so. And do I want a little bit brighter here? Yeah, I think I want the contrast to be a little bit higher. I don't see that this image has enough bite to it, if you will. So one of the things I can do is I can come down to the blacks into the slider, and I can put my cursor down and I can just start drawing over to the left, and I can start bringing in some blacks. Then I can put my cursor on the highlight side and I can start drawing it to the right, and I can start bringing out the white detail. Now, I did get a little bit of blacks without detail. I'm going to hold the shift bar down, zoom out, and then zoom back into this area. And I do have a little bit of paper white, but honestly, I'm okay with that. For those little tiny bits, I think that works out pretty nice. So that's a good way of taking a look. Now I take a look at my histogram. My histogram is reaching from the far left to the far right. Should all of my images reach to have a histogram that goes from far left to far right? Absolutely not. It depends on the image. And if I'm photographing in fog, chances are I'm not going to have any black information. So that's all right. Now I'm going to take a look at this image right here. Oh, look at that clipping warning. It's telling me that all that blue is black without detail, and I don't really have anything on the whites. We can see that this histogram, it's pretty dark. So I take a look at my exposure and I see somebody's been messing with my exposure slider. So I'm going to double click on that, bring it back to normal. Well, that helps the image out quite a bit, But if we take a look, I still have a lot of black without detail, and that's just too chunky for me. It's just going to be, when it goes to print, it's just going to be black blobs, and I don't really care for that. So instead, and again, I can drag, pull here, and I can get some information. That helped out nice. I can also work on my exposure slider here. I'm watching my histogram the entire time. I don't want this to go so far right that I start losing the detail information on this mushroom, for sure. So maybe I want to bump up the contrast a little bit. Remember, that's going to make your blacks blacker, your whites whiter. I gotta be careful of my blacks. I'm going to turn those back on. Don't really care for that. In this case, I am going to just drag that over and see what I can get back. Bring my exposure back down, and now I'm going to bring my slider, and I'm going to see that I have a shadows here. Well, if you get sliders in Lightroom, look, I'm going to slide these all the way to the left hand side. I'm not worried a bit about this image because I'm not working on the original. I'm just telling Lightroom to say, hey, make it look like this. We can take a look at my histogram. It's over on the right hand side. That's a little too dark. Double click, once again, set them back to neutral. I'm looking at, and by the way, I don't even have to turn on my clipping warning. I can just bring my mouse over and hover over it. So I need to increase my blacks. I'll put the clipping warning back on. I need to increase the information in my blacks so they aren't so dark. I'm also going to brighten up my shadows a little bit, not too much. And then I'm going to brighten up my highlights, maybe bring my exposure up, bring my highlights back down. It's just playing with it, seeing what happens. And then when you get close to the final result, you take a look and see if that's what you want. Now, I kind of forgot what the original image looked like, so I want to compare the two. While I'm in the develop module, I can come over here to where it says YY, and I have the before and I have the after. If I want to, I can switch so that they're all before, or I can switch so that they now I'm looking at the image, and I think it looks better than the original, but I kind of forgot what the original looked like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the develop module, the lower left hand corner. There is a YY, or there's other little symbols down here depending on which one you choose, before, after, left, right, on and on. But you can choose the view that you want to see your image. If you want to go top bottom, you can do that. And if you want to go top bottom split so you can see the difference as it changes, you can do that. You can also convert it so that this is built up to here. I can Command Z, get it back, or I can flip them in case I need to flip the two. So do know that you can check out your before and after that way. If there was an area that I was working on and I'm like, well, maybe it was better like 3 steps back, I can come back over here in the develop module, and then I can say, well, what was that highlight or the exposure? When did it start to look better? It looked better there. And you can go back into your history. Do note that if I come up here and then let's say I change the tint, which I haven't done anywhere in the history, I'm going to lose all of this information. Once I make that change, that erases anything that's above it. So do know that if you go back into your history, that you can lose that information if you make a different change. So just heads up. All right, so, and by the way, you can just click on these and go through the different stages. Now I just want to take a look at the entire view, and I think that's just a little too warm, so I'm going to bring that back down. Still looking at my histogram. Now my histogram, I'm looking at my whites. I haven't lost any detail, but honestly, it's just a little too far to the right to me. So I'm going to drag that back over to where it really starts to feel healthy. I take a look at an image like this. Again, I see that I don't really have any blacks information. I'm just going to pull it over to the left a little bit. And I don't really have any white information. I'm careful that I might lose my sky right here. That I'm looking at my histogram. Again, I can dial in my whites here. I can dial in my shadows here. I can play around with it to get the look that I want. One more. We have this nice young lady who was kind enough to let me photograph her. And we can see that my histogram is on the dark side, and I do have a little bit of white going on. So I really want to work with the midtones, and I'm just going to brighten up the midtones. Notice that I've got that going a bit overexposed right there. Don't really like the overexposure. So I'm going to grab my highlights and I'm going to drag it just to the left, just enough to where I lose that, I get that information back. All right, so histograms. They are great, powerful tools. You have them available in 2 modules because they're that important. If you don't know how to use a histogram to make it work for you, by all means, start practicing. Start looking at your images, looking at the histograms. If you don't know how to bring up your histogram on your camera while you're shooting, I recommend that you learn how to do this also. It's an incredibly strong tool to work with that you should pretty much always have at your hand whenever you're working with an image. Okay? Hope that helps. Thanks.